Alright, so now we're down to the final two keys of our puzzle as far as when it comes to overclocking and how we're going to make it happen. There's usually two problems that you run into when you overclock. One is the heat, which is what we're going to address with this, and the other is power, and we'll see that in the power supply next. And the reasons why the products I picked address or help combat that issue. This is the Corsair H100 Hydro Series, meaning it's water cooling. What this guy is basically this copper block goes on top of the processor, and it's actually on the bottom is all copper. On the top is a pump, and the pump pushes water through these tubes over to this. And this is a radiator, like in the front of a car. It's just a big long piece of metal that has tiny fins that run across here, and the water gets forced through the fins, and as it's going through the thin fins, the fans are blowing air across those fins, which cools the water, comes back out over here, and then goes back down the other side to get cooled even more, and then comes back in this tube, back into the pump, nice fresh cold water to cool the processor. Now, why is this better than, why is water cooling so good, or what makes it better than just a big old heatsink with big gigantic fans? Well, you're limited to the space. On a heatsink, you're limited to the space of how much heat dispersion you can get. So, I mean, like, you can buy these gigantic, massive heatsinks, and they'll probably compete with something like this, but I'm talking like you're taking up your whole case and you got a gigantic fan because you're trying to transfer that heat into the fins and out through air. Whereas this uses water, which transfers heat a whole heck of a lot faster than solids and air does. So the water immediately soaks up all that heat and removes it from the CPU. So that cools that, but it does transfer the heat over to the radiator. But the radiator has such a big surface that so much air can flow through, and that's what makes this such more efficient, because it gets the heat off the processor almost immediately, because the water is like literally millimeters away from the CPU. There's like just that bit of copper, and the copper is connected through this paste that will transfer the heat to the water, and that's what makes this great. You can even see they got a little comparison. So they're saying this is for Sandy Bridge numbers here. The Intel stock cooler, that little tiny piece of crap we saw, Intel box cooler, goes all the way up when the temperature is at 25°C. This is the fail point that it fails at. And the Hydro Series was at 47 degrees Celsius, which is really good. When it was running at 100% load, you can see there at 4.6 gigahertz. The noise is not much lower because, again, you're using two fans, but we're not really worried about noise. And if you're a gamer and you're like trying to squeeze out all the performance of yours, you probably don't care about noise either, because you more than likely have headphones on or something like that. But 37 dBA is still pretty quiet compared to some of those monster radiators or monster heat sinks that they have. Like, it sounds like a vacuum going off inside your computer. So let me tear this open and we'll get inside. Now we're not going to tear this all open and pull it all out completely, because it has a lot of parts that are cumbersome, and you'll see it more in the install video. But I'll just want to show you guys the difference in the stock cooler. I mean, there's tons of parts. It's all. Let me go ahead and add this. Don't let the water cooling part scare you. This is all enclosed already. This has all the water in it already. It has all the. It's more like coolant. It already has it in here. It's sealed. It's not going anywhere. You can be rough with it. It's not going to spill. I've used at least 7 of these units on people's computers I've put together, and not one of them is leaked. I have seen them on reports of forums where they did leak, And Corsair, if you go to their website, they have a forum, and people actually post on there saying, hey, this unit leaked on me, here's a picture. And the Corsair RAM guy immediately was like, give us a call, we'll talk about your computer, and we'll see about getting you a new one. So they even, like, at some point replaced the guy's entire computer because this leaked. So it's safe to begin with, and they do have a warranty, and they do take care of their customers. So I highly recommend the Corsair. A second option I would pick is the Swift Tech is the guys. Those guys make excellent computer cooling parts. But they're more on the higher end part for like custom heat sinks. So here's what goes on the CPU. And you can see right here. Look at that contact area. That's that grease I was telling you about. See how big that is? All right. This is how thin it is. This is the pump right there. And there's what actually pulls the heat off the processor, that square of gray. All right. Now let's look at the Intel one. Little tiny fan. That little circle and those little bitty bits of gray paste are going to pull heat off the processor. And this is, yeah, it's like bigger than the whole thing almost. So you can see right off the bat that the transfer area for the heat is just triple, if not 4 times, maybe even 5 times the surface area compared to this tiny little circle. Look at that. It's not even the size of a quarter. It's junk. And then you have the fans. This is where the heat transference happens, right? Okay. Like I told you earlier, the pump pulls the water, sends it along these tubes to this. And look how big this thing is. You can see all the way, there's those little fins I was telling you about in between there. You kind of see the light going through. But, I mean, look how massive this thing is. I mean, this thing is longer than my hand. I got pretty big hands. It's huge. Look at that. You got this much heat transference versus all of this. And here's our 2 fans. Again, we'll get into this on the install, but there's a lot of parts and pieces. This is probably the hardest part out of doing the whole computer is getting all these pieces assembled and ready to go on the processor. So I'm going to leave that in the box because I don't want to lose any parts, because this is kind of our big deal here. So now we'll move on to the power.